Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Residential Home Authority podcast. I'm Don Minehart, your host, and with me today, who will typically be with me, Vanessa St. Clair. Hello,
Hi.
Vanessa. How are
Hello,
you this evening?
hello. Good. Dad, why the formalities? We don't have to be that serious. It's not that serious. I mean, it is because this is the inaugural episode, but it isn't because it's you and I talking about, I feel like our favorite subject to talk about. Well, actually, no, but probably top three favorite subjects to talk about, which is real estate.
Well, yeah, because we all want to live in a house. Still, some of us rent, but the
Hmm.
bottom line is, it's such a.
Me.
What's that?
I'm the one
You
who
want to
still
rent?
rents.
Yeah, I
Between the two
know.
of us, I'm the one who rents. But
Yeah. But as I've heard somebody say, life is where or home is where life happens. So
oh,
wherever you
that's
make,
sweet.
yeah, it is sweet.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, I think you and I are uniquely prepared to do this podcast together. You more so, but I'm happy to just tag along and ride your coattails. The reason why you're uniquely positioned to talk about real estate is, well, for as long as I've been alive, you've been a, let's wait, we should go down the list. Agent, broker, energy auditor, Energy Star Partner of the Year, inspector. Am I missing
Wait
anything
a
that
second. You cut me short there. Master home inspector.
Master home inspector, my bad. You also are code official, correct? Or am I crazy?
I passed classes to be a code official, yes.
That's the thing. It's like you're a little too educated for me, like to the point where I know that actually, there's no such thing as too educated. It's just that 1,000% I don't remember all the certifications that you have because there's so many to count. You're just always learning, which is amazing.
I still am. Yes, I often get notices about webinars and seminars that I'm able to watch online, whether it's heating and cooling, whether it's constructing a wall, worried about water penetration, so on and so forth. It's pretty much a weekly learning process. I've always, let's put it this way, I enjoy it. And I always felt that the more you know, the better you can help people.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and,
But
and that's been my goal.
your
But
entire
my,
career has been real estate, which is amazing. It's like you're circling around this one topic, but you've done everything that you can possibly do within that subject matter. It's crazy because a few years ago, let me also say for the record, I definitely do not have as many. I'm a property manager, also a radon certified tester.
yeah, you left that
And
out for me. I am
oh, I'm
too.
sorry. I'm sorry. My bad. Forgot
I'm
that. Well,
joking.
I felt like your other ones were a little bit more important. I'm just throwing that in for
Sure.
myself there. Had to have something. But I also got to inspect with you for what was it, 4 years, 4.5 years. That was the best working experience of my life. I learned so much when we were doing that, and then since then have continued this passion that you started with me, and I'm really happy to talk about houses and everything we've learned. And I feel like we'll mostly talk about like residential single family homes, but we might get into multifamily. We might get into some other big stuff. I mean, real estate is such a wide topic, but pretty much on this podcast, the plan was for you and I to discuss what's going on in real estate today, what's happening with the rules, what people should know about it. Because wasn't it crazy how little people were aware of like basic stuff when it came to taking care
It's,
of their house?
it's amazing. For instance, there is a lot of people that do not know that realtors are not really employed. You're licensed, but you're working with a broker as an independent contractor. So there's no guaranteed paycheck there.
If you look on Indeed or something like that, like one of the websites posting for jobs, they go 200K plus a year potential. And it's like, oh, what's that? And then it's like real estate agent at so and so realty. And you go, oh, yeah. Oh, that's not a guaranteed. That's a dream scenario. 5% of agents, maybe. are clocking in commissions that are insane. Let's put it this way. It is a job. I feel like it's one of the toughest jobs, and it's one that so many people think they can just do. And I do kind of love it because you can teach yourself. But on one hand, also you do need to know more than what they teach in the class. What? Because
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the problems is that most people, A, don't realize how much work it is. B, they don't realize how much they really should know. And C, neither does the consumer.
mhm.
One of the things that has amazed me about this business, and we're going to talk about this in a future podcast, is people not taking the time to figure out who they're working with.
Yeah.
One of the things that we definitely share is a passion for knowledge of housing. And I
hmm
know for you, whenever you're around, and I hate to say this, but a bunch of men, and you start talking about houses, I'm sure they
Well,
look at you
yeah.
like,
Yeah, no, I definitely think we both get a kick out of the fact that I have probably seen more houses than a lot of people, a lot of gentlemen and a lot of people would not assume that I have done as much as I have. I feel like when we were working together, they would look at you and ask you a question and you would give them an answer and then they would make an offhanded comment to me and I would give them the same answer and then they would be like, "Oh, that's something Dawn just said." And I went, "Yeah, it is." It's almost
yeah,
as
why
if
is that a surprise?
it's almost as if we both know this information.
Yeah.
So yeah, that always cracks me up. But I feel like goals for this podcast, if I had to think about it, I want this to be a resource for people who I want it to be a resource for people who are on two sides of the spectrum. One, people who know a lot about real estate, but maybe don't think about niche topics related to it. And they want to hear more about what's going on or more about what they need to look for or, very specific things within the business. And the other group of people are the people who are looking to buy a house, looking to sell a house. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. I feel like this process has become really convoluted in the last like 5 years. And every time I see an article online, I just think it's so macro, 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 and it's not easy to understand. And I personally would not understand what was going on if I didn't work with you for so many years and then I wasn't currently working in housing. I wouldn't know what the hell was happening. So I think it's important that we just sort of make information readily accessible to people because ultimately this is most people's biggest purchase of their life.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. And
Yeah,
that's
like
why I said, even in researching who they're going to work with, it just amazes me. I
yeah.
mean, and the press, I get frustrated, and I know a lot of people that really know this business get frustrated because they'll put stuff out there that I'm sitting there reading it and I'm going, you are totally off base, totally off base. Just like this big lawsuit with the National Association of Realtors and the DOJ getting involved, and now people have to sign buyer agency agreements in order to see a house. There was so much information thrown out there,
Which I
and
think I think there are a lot of
those
there's
are the
good
kind of
stuff
things we
and
want to
bad
talk
stuff.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
well,
it's
those are the
good
things we
stuff
want to talk
and
about.
bad stuff. But it's like if you were a regular person reading this, and to be honest, even probably like 50% of agents reading about that, they're putting in so much info that it's just confusing people. So I'm hoping that with these episodes we can really delve into this topic and make it super accessible for people and maybe we can learn something along the way. Actually, I know we will. This will be great. I'm just excited to talk about
No
this with
doubt.
you.
Well, since you mentioned the market, I think in this episode being our first, we should talk about it. What we saw during the pandemic was just craziness. As soon
Yeah.
as it lifted, it was craziness. Now, I have a question for you.
hmm
What would you say if I told you that most buyers after the pandemic, in order to be competitive, did not inspect the home? They waived that inspection in their offer.
You know how I feel about that. because it it burns my soul with a fiery passion how much I hate that. I hate that. We're going to start off strong. Let's start off just like full opinion here. Anyone who buys a house without inspecting it, you're making a giant mistake. Whoever advised you to do that, they're not it. They're not it. And I'm sorry that you did that. I'm not saying that all inspectors are the best, but a baseline criteria, if you don't do that, if you don't have someone who's looking out for you, you're not doing it. And we will spend probably tens of episodes explaining all of the multitude of reasons why it is so
Yeah.
not a good idea to buy a house that's not inspected. But baseline opinion, that's a terrible decision. And I understand it was kind of a wild time and people were, and you had just, I understand that there were a lot of factors there, but I still think it was a bad call. Like,
Well,
hands down. What do you
remember
think?
that point because in our next episode, we're going to talk about things that you should ask a buyer's agent, and inspections is going to be one of them. And I just hope that when these people did purchase, that there wasn't any agents that said, "Oh, your offer is going to be accepted easier if you write an offer without an inspection." That puts them
Yeah,
in a position of liability.
we could talk about the agent's perspective on it later, but from the consumer perspective, you should never, ever, ever be purchasing something that big without having someone look at it because there are over 50 different ways in which something could be wrong with it that are easily catchable. But if you don't have someone who knows what they're looking at, you're never going to see it.
Well, that brings to mind a story.
Okay.
Inspected a house. The buyers were there.
Uh-huh.
They came near the end of the inspection as they wanted the advice on everything that I saw. And before I started to explain what I saw, the buyer looked at me, and we're standing outside the house. He looked, and it had snowed a little bit that day, so it was kind of cool, but we still stood there and talked. And he said, "Out of everything you saw, what's the most important factor, or what's your most important finding that I should know about?"
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him and I said, "I can't answer that." And he
Yeah.
said, "What do you mean? That's what I'm paying you for." And I said, "No, the reason I can't answer that is because it depends on what you consider to be most important, not what I consider.
Yeah.
Everything that I saw that was wrong is going to be written into your report. But let me give you an example." And as I was talking to him, I knew this was happening. I saw a postman walk across in front of me and go up the steps. And I looked at him and I said, "Did you see what just happened?" And he goes, "Yeah, I saw the postman go up there." I said, "Okay, well, let's think about this. What if he slipped and fell and hit his head? There's no handrail to those steps. Every 4 steps, you have to have a handrail. So there's no
Yeah,
handrail.
starting off strong.
So is that important?"
Yeah, it definitely is important. I mean, it's the inspection is a culmination of a bunch of little things, and I
Right.
think some things, you're going to look at a roof and be like, "Oh, the entire roof is shot, and that's a crazy amount of money to fix," and you would be correct, it is. But like, it also can be there's a bunch of little stuff that all adds up together. But what's crazy to me, and getting back to the market side of it, getting back to where things are now, there is a huge collection of people who bought houses during the pandemic at a wildly high price point because
Yeah.
everything was skyrocketing. And they got in on a good interest rate, which I'm happy for them, congrats. But people were raising the prices of houses, and we could talk about that reason why and other things. But people were raising the prices of houses for a lot of different reasons at that time. But let's say your budget, and let's start on the lower end here. I know I'm not trying to act like I'm living in 1980, but let's say your budget was 200K and like that was the max of your budget, and you end up getting a house. You're super excited about it. You put in the offer, and there's like 7 offers, and it gets pushed up to 210. And you're like, okay, I can make that work. But now you have all of these problems in the house that are not getting addressed because you are so focused on the mortgage and the base payment that you can't really allocate time or money into getting a lot of main functional points of the house fixed. I think that's leaving a really weird group. I feel like that's the first generation in which the housing stock has been completely deteriorating and no one is taking care of it. And you have a whole generation of people who are buying houses for the first time, or maybe even second and third, and they can't afford to fix it, but they can do little things. So we can talk about little things that they can do to help make that house, I don't want to say more habitable. That's not right. You can live in the house, but a little bit less of a burden. Like I feel like it's a little bit easier. Like we can help people figure out how they can change the housing experience for them. Because I have so many friends who bought houses in the last few years and they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. First of all,
Yes.
it's like an extra hobby having a house. It's a fun little, oh yeah, it's not just mowing the lawn. It's like, oh, I need to clean the
Yeah.
gutters. I need to do this. I need to do that. Like it's there are things that we can do, like little chores that will make the housing experience much better if you know about them and you do them up front. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to the market. We'll talk about like pricing and all that in later episodes, but you and I are so focused on like the house itself and the condition of the house.
True. Well, that's the important part because, yes, when you buy that house, the cost up front is X. But the question is, once you bought it, how much more is it going to cost you? And that's really where asking the right questions of your realtor comes in, and also knowing what your realtor knows. So
Mhm.
once again, that's something people can look forward to when we talk about these things. We did talk about the market briefly. I should throw this in here. Right now, you have what is known as a seller's market. It's been that way since the pandemic lifted, but you're seeing more inventory come in. But what
Mhm.
I'm seeing right now is people are still paying high money for houses. It's kind of a mix. You're going to see houses sell above list, and a lot of that depends on condition and pricing and location, obviously. And you're also seeing a lot of houses sit on the market. Right now, the average is up to, I think it's close to 120 days on the market.
That's
But a
wild.
lot of, but a lot of that has to do with pricing as well. And one of the things that I'm noticing is some of these homes that are selling right away are drastically underpriced.
Mhm.
And the ones that are sitting are overpriced. And the ones in between are hitting the proper market range.
Yeah.
And once again, the interesting thing about this, because you talked me into this podcast doing these, is
I didn't
I know a
talk you
lot.
into it. You know so much. That's the thing.
I know you said make sure I share it with people, so that's what we're going
Well,
to do.
I
So
think
we're going to.
here's no, say what we're gonna say. Sorry, Dad.
What I was going to say is we're going to break this down an episode per episode, and we're going to hit a lot of topics. And we could talk for hours. There's no doubt. And the
And we
beauty is
will.
that you have that back. What's that?
And we will.
Yeah, we will. But I mean, you have that background of being with me for inspections. You've seen a lot of houses, and in some case, more than some agents. But the other thing is, when you went through, you saw the underbelly of the houses because
Well,
you went up into attics for me, and
well,
you were
that's
with me when we went into crawl spaces and a lot of places that realtors never see.
that's
What
only
was that
because you
move?
made me. That's only it was a tear going down my face because I probably have like asbestos lung because you were like, yeah, get in that hole. I can't go in
Yeah,
there. My knee
I
is
still
bothering me today. You go in there. So that's why.
I
That
still
yeah. I
remember I still remember the house with all the mice running around.
Yeah, there's a few of those, and
Yeah,
we'll share like fun stories too. But the main crux of this, and I'm really excited. I think this is a great intro. But what I'm most excited about is for my entire life, you have been you've always ingratiated yourself into what you do, and you always wanted to be the best. Not because you wanted other people to know about it or anything, but you wanted to be the best because you took a huge pride in being knowledgeable and not just kind of speaking without knowing. And if you didn't know the answer, you would go and figure it out. And you really instilled that in me. And your topic of fascination was every facet of real estate. And you've sold, I mean, you've set records with how much you've sold. You started your own brokerage. You've trained agents who are now like some pretty big agents. We should state
Yeah.
this is in Pittsburgh. We're talking about Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You you trained some pretty big agents who are kind of a big deal, but we're not going to like that name drop some Pittsburgh real estate agents.
Yeah.
It's not like Angelina Jolie, but you know what I mean. It's like these are pretty big people in the field, and I feel like and then also you also were teaching real estate classes for many years too. When we were thinking about this, you're still an agent. You're still working on developments right now. You have amazing projects and clients that you're working with that are super exciting. I think what we were talking about that really pushed me to be like, we should do this, is that I realized one, so many people in my age bracket and otherwise don't know anything. And it's a shame, and they should, and information should be really accessible. And two, you just have a wealth to share with people. And I think your passion is like sharing is caring. There's so much that you know that it would go to waste if more people didn't hear about it. So I just want to be here to help facilitate that and
Thank you.
hopefully throw a few fun, hard opinions around every once in a while just to keep people listening. You know what I mean?
Well, someone might sit back and say, what was wrong with this guy? He was an agent, then he was a broker, then he left the business and became a energy auditor, and then he ended up being a master home inspector, and now I'm back to real estate. Well, one of the reasons I went back to real estate was because you left the area, and I didn't really want to pick another person to work with me. And Sharon St. Clair and Karen Marshall asked me to come back into the business. So that's another story, another episode. The
Yeah.
bottom line is, though, being this our first episode, we should pass on some information for people. It's the timing of this is we're heading through the fall into winter,
Yeah.
and as I left the house today to go do an open house, I'm looking and I've got leaves all over the place. And I was thinking about the fact that those leaves are going to end up in a gutter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a
So we
bad
should
place for them to be.
Yeah, we should talk about the three things that people should do, the first three things that people should do to like get their house ready for winter. And then our next episode, we can talk about some more. Just because I know we've been going on and on for a little bit.
Yeah.
So first thing is the leaves.
Yeah.
The
Clean the
leaves and
gutters
the
out. Well, you've got to be careful because someone's going to need a ladder.
yeah.
And I suggest you hire somebody unless you're
Mhm.
courageous, because there are proper ways to get on a ladder and go up. And most people,
Don't do that.
it's a challenge. But the bottom line is the gutters need to be cleaned out. If you don't do it, they're going to get wet. They're going to clog up. They're going to hold water. And we're coming into a freeze thaw season. And if that water freezes in those gutters, it could damage the gutters, could damage the roof, could damage shingles. It can do a lot of harm. And then the other thing that you should do as we're heading into winter is especially in Pittsburgh, we're into somewhat of a rainy season will be coming up. Grab an umbrella, go outside, walk around your house and see where the water's going. You
Yeah.
definitely you don't want any overflowing the gutters. You don't want any not going down the downspouts. There's receivers for a lot of these houses at the ground level. You want to make sure the water's not overflowing there.
No.
But water is a big concern to get away from
Yeah.
your house at this time.
The thing is that I don't think people realize that, and maybe they do. Maybe I'm just overstating that. But all of these things, like dirt, grass, all the trees, leaves, all of them, and even also building materials, they contract, and depending on the temperature, they literally change in size. So when you
Yep.
have a huge clump of leaves in your gutter, that's fine when it's warm. I mean, actually, it kind of isn't, because if it fills up too
Yeah.
much, I mean, it could be the dead of summer, and if you have a heavy rain, they could be leaking everywhere. And you don't want to ever see rain like if you're sitting in front of a window, you don't want to see water like coming down over the sides in heavy pools, because that just means that your gutters are clogged, and that means that water isn't properly flowing through, and it's going to get closer towards the foundation of the house. So your gutters should pretty much always be cleaned. That sounds terrible. You should always have this done. I know that's tough to say because people have lives, but I think if you set a schedule, what do you think? Like every 6 months or something? Or do you think we should do it sooner?
No, I think especially if, let's say, right now the leaves are falling. My suggestion would be is I wouldn't worry too much about it until we're partway through that season to where you'll
Okay.
get the bulk of them out. But depending on when you do it, you might want to consider how many more leaves are going to come down by the time winter hits. That would be a
Okay.
concern. And then the other time to do it would be right at early spring, because by then all the leaves will have fallen, and any other debris left behind from snow or whatever was would have been left behind. Sometimes you'll get snow on tree branches, they'll break off. Just take a look and make sure they're clear. And then also in the spring, the bigger key is not as much looking up at your gutters, but once again, seeing where the water is going when it does rain. That's really a key. Because keep in mind, water should always run away from your foundation. So let's say it's overflowing the gutters or overflowing at the receptacle of those downspouts. You're going to get more
It's
water there. And then if it freezes, you're going to have a cracked basement.
Yeah, basically what we're saying is if you have your house, right? Like this is a wall to your house. You want the dirt, mulch, rocks, anything you've got along your house, you want it to have a bit of a slope that's going outwards. If this is the wall of your house and this is the inside, okay, so the palm of my hand is the outside of the house. You don't want to have anything that can go down in there. And when you have water that leaks down, it water erodes no matter what it is. Oh my, there was a clip when I was a kid. You probably remember this. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
I
Do you
remember
remember?
Bill.
There was a clip where Bill Nye had like a brick or this crazy huge stone, and they had one drop of water on it, and it just showed how this one drop of water, and it was a continuous amount, but it was a very small amount, and they were showing how it was eroding a very like a pencil thin line through this like cinder block or brick or something. It was crazy, and so if one small continuous line of water can do that to one brick, imagine what an onslaught of water, and then especially, in the winter, like it's not only is it water coming down into this area, but then it comes down there, it sits in the topsoil and then freezes and pushes against the
The wall
foundation.
causes cracks,
Yeah.
causes cracks in the foundation. And the other thing that people don't realize is this: when you build a house, you've dug that house out, your ground is further away from the house than the foundation itself. So they're going to backfill. Hopefully, they backfilled, put a French drain in, put some gravel in, we hope.
Hopefully they did
But
that.
here's the bottom line: when they backfill the dirt, they can't pressurize it. It just gets dumped there. So what happens is over the next few years, as many as 5, that dirt will settle.
Hmm.
So the question is, how much did it settle? And a lot of times I'll see this, we saw this a lot in inspecting, but I'll see this even today where the builders made it nice and flat. And a year later, you come back and everything around it is back towards the house. So if
Yeah.
you've bought a new house recently, you really need to pay attention to that.
Like
Or
a
if
new
it's only 5
construction
years
house.
old, you need to see where it's at today.
Yeah,
So yes,
I
that's
think Yeah, it's just good, when you're doing the leaves, when you're checking the gutters, just walk around the whole exterior and just make sure that and I feel like it's not that crazy to buy dirt. Like, I don't know how expensive it is, but I feel like,
expensive,
oh, it is.
but you need it.
Yeah,
It's
well,
very
yeah.
important.
Well, you know what? Let me put it this way. Either a few bags of dirt or wall anchors. You know what I mean? Or
And
huge straps, So I think ultimately, a few bags of dirt are not going to be the thing that does you in,
not compared to
but
the loss you're going to experience if you have to go and use wall anchors or strapping. Because I think if you look at statistics on resale, a home with no foundation damage and an exact same home right next to it with foundation damage, the home without it's going to sell for a higher price. So you're going to
yeah,
cost yourself more. bottom line. So that's your outside. No
Okay.
inside, obviously, it's going to get cold. So what are we going to operate when it's cold?
Furnace. Wait,
Furnace.
that felt like a pop quiz. Furnace.
I surprised you with that one. So, if you haven't had your furnace serviced in a couple of years, you should,
Yeah.
because a furnace, when it burns, creates carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a killer. Even small amounts will affect your health. So they're able to measure that to make sure that the combustion is right. The other thing is, if it's not combusting right, let's say it is small amounts and your detector doesn't pick it up, then what you have is a waste of gas. So it's running more often than it should. Or sometimes the timing's off on it where it'll overrun or run too much. So the bottom line is, get it serviced if it's been a couple of years. Second thing
Yeah.
is, replace
Oh
the
no.
filter.
Yeah. That's the big one. That's the big one. Because if you think about it, all of the air that you're going to breathe, because you're not going to be spending a lot of time outside. I mean, unless you love a snow sport, and good for you, and I'm happy for you. I personally am an indoor gal. I love a book. I love to curl up next to a fireplace. I spend my time indoors on most days, but especially during the winter. So you want to make sure that the air that you're breathing is clean. And the best, easiest way you can do that is getting filters. Now we have
Yeah.
some opinions about filters. Some of them are the same, some of them are different. Tell me what you think about purchasing
I'll tell you one
filters.
we're constant on, and that is change it.
Oh, that's true.
Change
That's
the
true. No matter what, this
no,
is.
no. My recommendation is this: most times it's going to slide into a slot, and where that slot is, the air is going to flow through it, as you mentioned. Now, the best type of filter, and you can go crazy on these things. You can buy HEPA filters, which are ranked 13, 10, 11, and you can look that up on Google to see which one is most important to you. But the bottom line is, any filter that you buy should have pleats like a pleated skirt.
Mhm.
And I'm not a fan of a high HEPA filter. I'm more of a fan of changing the filter. So the reality is, number one, here's what the pleats do. The dirt comes in, they hit the pleats, and they deflect off. And the reason you want a pleated filter is you're deflecting the dirt into an area which allows, and it's bouncing the air away from the air that needs to go through that filter.
Mhm.
So it's hitting it up on the sides of that pleat versus in the center, which stops the air. So that's one of the reasons for it. But my thinking is, unless that filter is super rated, the most it should be in there is for 3 months. But the reality is, I prefer that if I have a furnace that only takes a 1 or 2 inch filter, that sucker is going to be out of there in 30 days. And I'm not even going to look at it. I'm just going to replace it. It's not that expensive. But if my furnace is running longer, it's going to cost a heck of a lot more than the filter.
Yeah,
And I
no,
want to
I
breathe
agree.
clean air.
Well, so this is
And
where
the
we.
other thing,
Oh,
one more thing I wanted to mention about the filter. When you put it in
okay.
there, make sure that it's sealed. So I can take a piece of duct tape and tape over the opening. I can do something, but some furnaces anymore have a little thing that clamps onto it. Some of them have
I have
a
that.
magnet. But the bottom line is, if you're letting it just sit in there, the pressure that it produces will pull the dirt around the furnace and in that room into the furnace and possibly bypass that filter. And if you're bypassing the filter with dirt, or you forget to put a filter in there, you're going to decrease the efficiency of that furnace pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's the amount of stuff that's pulled into it is going to be really nasty. So here's where we differ on furnace care
Okay.
and filters, okay? Because I agree that they should be changed often. I agree. I personally, we at the building that I work at, we change them every 3 months. For me personally, I buy my own filter even though I live in an apartment. I buy my own filter because I have two cats, so I want something a little thicker and I want something a little bit more than the basic, and I'm willing to pay for that on my own. I know that you're like, it can be the cheapest one, but I'm like, I will die if I have dander all over me all the time. and that furnace will just suck it in. So I like to have that extra little, like, little bit of padding, little bit of extra things for stuff to go through. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's more important that you change it than it is you getting the most expensive one. If the biggest hindrance to you changing your filter is price, then I would rather you do a cheaper one and do it more often. But I personally, since I have two little cats that I love very much, but I don't love their dander and their fur and all of their business all the time, I like to put a slightly more expensive one in. But that's your choice. Most important thing is that you just change it out.
It is. It is the most important, because you're using recycled air when you're all closed up in the house.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that people wouldn't think about in the wintertime, or may not think about, is your air conditioner, because you're not going to be using it.
Yeah.
So what we saw a lot of when we inspected were these air conditioners sitting out there with all this tarp wrapped around them, or taped up nice and tight so no air gets to it.
Yeah, they even sell like the sleeves that go over it too, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't they sell like
Which
those insulated bags?
Which
What?
you should never use. You should never use those.
Yeah, you shouldn't. They're not good.
Well, here's the thing. If you want your air conditioner to continue to look pretty, maybe you can put a board across the top of it to keep the snow from falling into it.
But you can also power wash it. You could just power wash it in the spring.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
let me rephrase the phrase. Well. Let me rephrase that. Don't take a power washer. Do not take a power wash. Okay. Before we do any other episodes, I would like it to be stated that sometimes I use phrases and then I have to backtrack, because when I say power wash, I mean a hose. I'm not going to be out there with like something that could cut off your toe. You know, you've seen those videos where people are cutting off limbs with those power washers. I'm not talking about that. I just meant like, I'm washing something and it's powerful. No, you know what I mean? Like, I think you can just wash it. You want it to breathe though.
But here's the thing. The reason you don't wrap it is because you have a change in humidity going on outside, from freezing to warm during the wintertime. You run the chance of an organic substance growing on the surface of that air conditioner if you don't have it open to the air.
Yeah.
And if you do that and you crank that baby up in the summer, or in the spring, I should say, because that'll be the first chance of having that blow through your house. So just put a board across it. Don't wrap it. Don't do anything to it. And if you don't do anything to it, who cares? It may look a little rusty, but it'll probably work.
Yeah.
And then in the wintertime, make sure you clean your sidewalks, keep them salted, keep the steps salted, because you are responsible for the safety of anybody that comes there.
Well, yeah, but I feel like that took a bit of a turn. I was going to just talk about the nice things that we can do for ourselves. I think we can get into all the serious, like, you can be held responsible if this is wrong type of things in the next episode. I feel like what do? We introduced ourselves. Very important. We gave some, hopefully you get a nice little personality read from both of us, because you're going to be seeing a lot of us, because there's going to be a lot of episodes coming out. But I think most importantly, hopefully we shared some tips that maybe you heard before, but you needed reiterated, or maybe you haven't heard before. And either way, they're useful. So please do them, right?
Yep. Thank you for listening to the inaugural episode of the Residential Home Authority.
Home Authority! Okay,
so
bye.
Until next time, see you later, Vanessa.
Okay, love you, Dad. Bye.
Love you too. Bye-bye.